Hey everyone, tonight we're waking up bright and early in a medieval village to the smell of damp hay, the chilly wind blowing through the cracks in the walls, and the welcoming sound of someone coughing up phlegm downstairs. Welcome to the year 1000 something. It doesn't really matter which one because honestly, at any given point in this dark millennium, your chances of lasting a single day are still pretty much zero. You have no vaccine, no electricity, no Wi-Fi. And yes, that weird lump on your neck could be a sign of the plague. You probably wouldn't survive this. But that's okay. It's just a bedtime story. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And comment below where you're listening to this from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background sound, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. The day begins before the sun rises. Literally, you hear a distant bell calling for morning mass. Even if you have no idea of Latin, it's best to pretend you understand. Opening your eyes, you realize you're lying on a pile of damp straw covered by a thick cloth that has definitely had fleas as permanent residents. The wooden roof creaks in the wind, and outside, the sound of chickens fighting with a pig marks the beginning of another day without coffee, or bread, or dignity. You get up and smell it. A mix of wood smoke, fermented sweat, and something dead in the yard. Your neighbor coughed again. This time with a little blood. He swears it was just because he swallowed raw. You decide to believe it, or at least pretend, because you don't want to sleep in a barn with the dead bodies tomorrow either. The houses here are made of poorly fitted wood or dry clay, with windows covered with fabric. Glass is a luxury that only nobles have. The light enters weakly, but the cold penetrates strongly. There is no thermal insulation. And no one knows the concept of half. You step out of your house and are faced with medieval reality. Ankle-deep mud, excrement being dumped directly into the street, which is great because you forgot to use the bucket during the night, and a line to the communal well. The silence between people is not spirituality, is a lack of energy. Working 14 hours a day in exchange for stale bread and a chance not to die of measles takes away some of the desire to socialize. And there it is, the first great enemy of your day. It's not a dragon. It's the bubonic plague. The disease stalks the villages like a silent shadow. It arrives suddenly, with fever, swollen nodes, and the inevitable march toward death. The name Black Death would come later. For now, it's just that horrible thing that killed half of your cousin's village. Historically speaking, the bubonic plague devastated Europe in the 14th century, but smaller outbreaks had occurred before. Rats and their fleas were the main vectors, although peasants thought the problem was bad air. This led to measures such as wearing masks with flowers over their noses or fleeing to the countryside, which only spread it faster. You walk to the church, not out of faith necessarily, but because it's the center of everything. Meetings, trials, weddings, funerals, and sometimes the only source of emotional relief in the chaos. The priest doesn't have much medical knowledge, but if you cough too much near him, he might bless you with holy water and tell you to bleed a little, literally. Medieval medicine went like this. If something's wrong with you, the problem must be in your blood. So let's take some out with a knife. The scariest part? This was a common practice based on the four humors of the body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The balance between them was everything. Historians still debate whether this model was interpreted in a practical way by folk doctors or just blindly reproduced based on hastily translated Greek and Latin texts. But even so, you thank the priest and try to look healthy. The trick is to pretend that the chill is just a cold. On your way home, you encounter a hunched-over old woman spitting on the ground. She stares at you and mutters something in a dialect that sounds like a cross between drunken German and broken Latin. You don't understand, but you wave back. Let's not piss anyone off, especially since the next person accused of witchcraft could very well be you. All it takes is one wrong look, one bruise that won't heal, or just someone jealous of your new woolen cape. You're in the kind of society that burns people in public to pass the time. And speaking of public, be careful when sneezing. There is no health after the sneeze. Most people just stare at you, waiting to see if you start foaming at the mouth or fall flat on the ground. If you don't, you pass the test. For now. Now the sun finally rises in the sky, golden, beautiful, and completely irrelevant because you are already exhausted, and it is still only the first hour of the day. You sit on the stone steps of your house and watch the village awaken. Children run barefoot. The blacksmith begins to strike iron, and a group of women carry bundles of straw on their heads. A horse passes slowly, pulling a cart with what appears to be another body covered in cloth. Life goes on, because in the Middle Ages, survival was already an achievement worthy of celebration. You still try to figure out how you made it through the early morning hours alive when someone hands you a piece of bread hard enough to be used as a weapon. Breakfast has arrived, and it's looking at you with contempt. In the Middle Ages, the first meal of the day is not made with scrambled eggs, American pancakes, or a cappuccino with almond milk. Here, you're grateful if the bread has more wheat than sawdust. The meal is called prandium, and for many people, especially peasants, it didn't even exist. Eating before work was a luxury. Most people woke up, cleaned what they could, prayed a little, and went straight to the fields or the barnyard. Only around mid-morning, if there was anything left over from yesterday's supper, would they have bread with an onion, or a bowl of barley porridge, if it was a day particularly blessed by the saints and without rats in the pantry. You look at your portion and realize there's no butter, no cheese, no clean water. The breakfast drink is a light, cloudy beer made from the last harvest leftovers. Everyone drinks it, including children. It's not a whim. Water is basically an elixir of disease. Boil it? Only if you have the time, firewood, and the habit of wanting to live to be 40. As you slowly chew on the bread that seems to have been left in a cupboard since the last crusade, you notice the conversations around you, or rather, the lack thereof. Talking early in the morning is not common. Most people see the sunrise as a reminder that another difficult day has begun, rather than as a reason to joke or talk about the weather. Introspection is almost cultural, and perhaps also because everyone is conserving energy. Literally, you see a lady dipping her bread into a mug of hot broth. It's basically water with garlic in it. Sometimes they throw in a piece of cured meat, more for morality than taste. The broth is called poor man's soup and is also used as lunch. Eating twice a day is standard, and 3 times, well, only if you're a nobleman or about to die of the flu. Now, get ready for the cherry on top. The food is shared with everyone. There is no your plate. There is a central bowl where everyone dips their bread with a communal wooden spoon. In times of pandemic, this concept gives us the creeps, but in the Middle Ages, it was the way of life. After all, sharing food was a sign of unity, and unintentionally, it was also an excellent way to spread intestinal diseases. By the way, here's a curious fact. Most peasants didn't have access to salt in abundance, and without salt, preserving meat became almost impossible. This meant that most of the diet was vegetarian by force. Roots, cabbage, grains, bread, more bread, and some plant that the monks said was edible but doesn't seem to be. Historically, it is known that the peasant diet was low in protein but rich in fiber. This would explain the state of the houses, strong smell, and a lot of need to go to the bathroom. But you won't find a bathroom, because there isn't one. Back to the bread. You bite into one more piece and almost lose a tooth. Yes, it's common. The flour was ground with stones, which left microscopic fragments in the final product. This, over the years, ruined almost everyone's teeth. Brushing? Only with a tree branch. Toothpaste? Better not to ask. Some rubbed salt. Others, charcoal. But most simply accepted gingivitis as part of life's package. You finish eating and wipe your mouth with the sleeve of the tunic. There are no napkins, and even if there were, no one would waste a clean cloth on it. The rags were washed a few times a month, usually in the river, with ashes and a lot of hope. The clothes you are wearing now, by the way, must have belonged to someone else. And perhaps you still have them in spirit, because the smell is definitely not just yours. Historians still debate whether the morning fast was always religious or whether, in many cases, it was simply an economic necessity disguised as spirituality. After all, the church had enormous power over everyday life, and there were many rules about what, when, and how to eat. During Lent, for example, no meat, only fish. And even then, what if you didn't have access to fish? That's your problem. God is watching. You notice that even the way you sit to eat is different. No more chairs with backrests. The benches are simple, and many people eat standing up, leaning against fences or walls. Eating is a quick, almost functional task, and absolutely nothing comes with a decorated napkin or placemat. Not even a plate, often. It's done by hand. A practice that, strangely, you start to find practical, or at least inevitable. Outside, the sound of bells echoes again. The day is truly beginning now. The nobles must be having their breakfast, of dried fruit, wine, and gingerbread. But you head straight for the fields, your stomach only half convinced that this was, in fact, a meal. And if you think the next few hours are going to be calmer, well, that's because you haven't seen the crops yet. You barely had time to digest the bread that looked more like a clay tile when you heard the call to the fields. It was a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to echo from the very bones of the village. The beating of bells, hooves, hoes in a routine that didn't give you a break, not even in your dreams. And there you are, officially promoted to medieval peasant. Congratulations. Your salary is hunger, backache, and taxes that would make even the tax authority seem sympathetic. You walk into the fields with a group of workers. The ground is damp, and each step drags the mud from the road, as if the world is trying to swallow you back up. You carry a wooden hoe reinforced with iron, and before you can ask what to do, you are digging. Plant, harvest, weed, repeat. All this before the sun reaches the top of the sky. The work is rough. No tractor, no gloves, no motivational playlist on your headphones. Just you, the hard earth, and the constant feeling that a hernia is about to form. Your fingers form calluses before noon, and your body complains like it's a sick uncle. 83 years old who fell down the stairs. It doesn't matter if it's winter or summer. If you don't work, you don't eat. And even working, eating is still a lottery. Because part of the production is not yours. It belongs to the feudal lord. And another part belongs to the church. And another part belongs to the king. And another part belongs to the tax on the tax that collects the tax. In the end, you are left with a basket of turnips and an embarrassed blessing from a priest who also owes you bread. The social structure is as clear as a bell. The lord of the manor lives up high in the castle, and you live on the ground, in the mud with the chickens. He provides protection, they say, but what he really provides is a collection of rules, demands, and occasional appearances on horseback just to remind you that you exist. Oh, and if by chance you're found harvesting grain outside the authorized season whippings. Fair, according to him. Brutal, according to your body. But let's say you excel. Work hard, keep your head down, and don't die of smallpox. You might be able to earn the right to farm a piece of land for yourself. A small one, sure, and still subject to confiscation if the Lord's Son decides that the land has a good view of the sunset. Historically, agricultural work in the Middle Ages was intensive and of very low productivity. Rudimentary tools, little crop rotation, and a brutal dependence on the weather made everything unstable. A dry summer or a late frost could mean widespread famine. And you're still there, crouched down, pulling weeds by hand because they haven't invented the concept of a gardening glove yet. You look to the side and see a woman working with her baby strapped to her back. She sings softly, a song that seems more like a plea for survival. There, everyone helps. Children scare away birds with pots. Old people pick up stones from the ground. And the animals are part of the team. Oxen to pull, dogs to watch, and cats to look busy while watching everyone work. And since we're talking about cattle, here's a bizarre curiosity. There were specialized professions like the urinator, someone responsible for collecting human and animal urine to use as ammonia in cleaning fabrics or in leather production. That's right, you can wake up early to collect pee. The Middle Ages had its own creative ways of traumatizing anyone. The sun rises and you're soaked. Not just with sweat, but with a tiredness that seems ancient. Your body aches in ways that defy biology. And just when you think you're about to get a break, someone yells that the quad is stuck. You go to help, of course. If not out of kindness, then out of fear of looking lazy. And lazy, here, is just a nickname for soon to be replaced by someone more desperate. Historians still debate whether peasants lived completely oppressed or whether there was a community network of solidarity that alleviated their suffering. There are records of local festivals, harvest celebrations, and even small freedoms granted by older lords. Kind, but let's face it, even the best medieval Monday still involves back pain, blisters on the feet, and the constant chance of catching a lethal infection from scratch. The bell rings again. Time for a short break. You sit under a tree, the shade is your air conditioning, and eat a piece of bread with raw onion. Warm water from the canteen. Silence. A bee is circling you. You don't even have the energy to scare it away. Close your eyes for a second and dream of air conditioning, a spring mattress, and a post-workout whey protein shake. And then you hear someone scream. A boy has fallen off his horse and hurt his arm. His mother runs over, says a prayer, and wraps the wound in a dirty cloth. Take him to the doctor? Which doctor? The village healer is busy exorcising a coughing goat. Maybe tomorrow, you return to the field and try not to think too much. The day is still far away, and your mission now is to pull up turnips until the sun starts to set. Yes, the same turnips you'll eat tonight, if there are any left, if it doesn't rain, if the feudal lord doesn't decide to take them all for a little feast with sour wine and undercooked game. And even after all this, you're still not done for the day. But that part of the journey is over. Take a deep breath, or at least try. Did you think plowing the soil with a crooked spine was the height of suffering? Then wait until you find out that your religious beliefs can literally put you at the stake. In the Middle Ages, believing in the wrong God was like declaring war on the entire heavenly community. And even if you were devout, you still had to do everything the right way. That is, the way the church said was right in that exact century, in that exact village, under that exact grumpy-looking priest. You come back from the fields with dirty hands, but instead of rest, the church bell calls for evening mass. Yes, again, the church is the true general manager of the Middle Ages. She commands, demands, guides, punishes, and is also the only source of light in a world without electricity or public libraries. So you go. Why not go? It's dangerous. Inside the church, the air smells of incense, old wood, and passive-aggressive fear. The walls are covered in frescoes showing sinners being fried in cauldrons or pulled up on hooks by muscular, overly excited demons. Everyone listens in silence, though no one really understands the Latin. Not even a priest. But intonation is what counts, right? Now, let's say you're a little more curious. You decide, for example, to ask a simple question. But why would God allow so much famine and plague? That's it. Game over. Someone heard, someone reported you, and now you're on the Inquisition's radar. And believe me, they're not known for their diplomatic skills. The Inquisition, in its various forms, served to keep collective thought within a very narrow range. Anything that deviated from the official doctrine was labeled heresy. And heresy was serious business. It wasn't just a scolding. It was a trial, a dark cell, a few days without food, and eventually, well, a bonfire if things escalated. Historically, heresy trials included bizarre tests like dunking the person in a lake. If they floated, they were a witch. If they sank, they were innocent. Congratulations, they sank, but they also died. Medieval justice. Nobody wins, everybody loses. You leave Mass with your heart racing. And it's not just because the priest looked at you for half a second too long. It's because everyone there is, in some way, under surveillance. Gossip spreads like wildfire. The woman who picked too many herbs? A witch. The old man who talked to cats? A wizard. The left-handed kid? Satanist, of course. And speaking of witchcraft, you meet a local healer on the way. A lady with a shrewd look, calloused hands, and a belt full of strange bottles. She offers you an ointment for your blisters. You accept, but you're on alert. The entire village respects and fears this woman. Because yes, she knows how to heal. But if the harvest is bad this year, they will blame her. And you too, for talking to her. The relationship with faith is intense and, at times, suffocating. Relics of saints are venerated. Crusades are organized, and any suspicion of deviation becomes a court case. Oh, and speaking of crusades, you hear rumors that young men from the next village are being drafted to fight in the East. Because nothing says true faith like traveling thousands of miles to kill someone who believes something different. Interestingly, the idea of individual faith as we know it today never crossed people's minds. Salvation was collective, communal, and regulated. The church was not just a religion. It was also a bank, a notary's office, a school, and a psychologist. Historians still debate whether the spiritual realm was sustained more by genuine faith or by pure, institutionalized fear. But what is certain is that questioning the status quo failed in the overwhelming majority of cases. You pass by a group of children being catechized with a stick in the priest's hand. They repeat memorized phrases, and one of them has a black eye. No one comments. He probably fell, or sinned with childish intensity. And even among the devout, there are disputes. Within the church itself, religious orders jockey for influence. Dominican monks, Franciscans, Benedictines, all with slightly different ideas about how to properly suffer in God's name. Some of these theological disputes end in written pages, others in blood. You get home and think about praying, but you don't even know where to start. So you kneel in a corner and just give thanks for still breathing. even if it's an air full of smoke, sickness, and doubt. And then, as the evening light disappears behind the hills, you realize, here, even thinking can be dangerous. And if thinking is already a sin, imagine dreaming. You barely have time to finish your impromptu prayer when you hear a call outside. A tense buzz, heavy whispers, and hurried footsteps in the mud. Someone is sick, or more, and of course, the village doctor has been called. You decide to go along, because after all, there's nothing like a little medieval medical entertainment to whet your appetite, if you still have any. You arrive at the victim's house, a sweating man with wide eyes and a strange swelling on his neck. The people around him make the sign of the cross, but no one comes too close. The doctor enters with his dark robe, a worn leather bag, and a leech in his hand. He looks at the patient, mutters something about imbalanced humors, and immediately begins the treatment. Bloodletting. Yes, bloodletting, but without wine and fruit. The medieval kind involved cutting open a vein with a blade and letting the blood flow for a few minutes, under the pretense that this would drive out the evil. In reality, the patient usually became weaker. Sometimes they got better by pure luck. Sometimes they died soon after. But hey, at least they tried, right? What if the problem was more internal? High fever, vomiting, delirium? Oh, then came a combo. Bloodletting, tea made from questionable herbs, purging with natural laxatives, and in more extreme cases, apply an ointment made with goat dung, mercury, or virgin urine, if you could find one. Yes, it was practically desperate alchemy with ingredients straight out of a sanitary nightmare. Do you think this is an exaggeration? Well, you should know that documents from the time describe recipes, such as boar fat ointment with vinegar and coral powder, used to treat everything from boils to demonic possessions. And yes, historians still debate whether doctors really believed in these methods or were just repeating ancient traditions because there was no alternative. The title doctor was also flexible. Many had no formal education, nor was it a given that they could read. Others were self-taught monks with access to poorly translated Greek texts. And those who did study at medieval universities learned medicine from Aristotle, Galen, and Hippocrates. The problem was that these authors lived 1,000 years earlier, and their ideas were never tested in practice. Diagnosis? The doctor would look at the color of your urine by holding the vessel up to the light. Treatment? It was basically prayer with a scalpel. You return to the village and pass an old lady selling herbs. She says that chamomile helps with insomnia, and that a tea made with valerian root wards off bad dreams. It seems harmless, but be careful. Medicinal herbs were on a fine line between healing and witchcraft. It depended on who saw it, when they saw it, and what mood the priest was in that day. Even treatments that actually worked ran the risk of being dismissed as the work of the devil. A peasant proudly shows you an amulet he wears around his neck, a piece of bone carved with symbols. He believes it wards off disease. Another says that sleeping with a dried frog under your pillow cures headaches. And as absurd as it may seem, these practices often worked as a placebo, or were what was left when all else failed. And then you witness a more spiritual consultation. A woman is brought to the priest because she is laughing too much. That's right, laughing at odd times, talking to herself, crying a lot, having fevers for no reason. Any of these symptoms could be signs of demonic possession. The treatment? Confession, flagellation, or exorcism. Sometimes all three. You try not to show surprise. After all, laughing here could be dangerous. Now about surgeries. No, you don't want one. But sometimes there's no choice. A warrior wounded in battle, a farmer who lost part of his finger to a scythe, they end up in the hands of the barber surgeon. Yes, the same one who cuts hair. He also pulls teeth, opens boils, stitches up wounds, and, if he's daring, even tries amputations. No anesthesia. At most, a generous swig of wine and a rag to bite on. The survival rate? Let's just say it was low. The instruments are made of metal, but rarely clean. A scalpel with remnants of previous surgery? Common. Sepsis? Almost guaranteed. And if you survived the cut, you would still face infections, gangrene, and fevers that no one knew how to treat. The concept of washing your hands before touching a patient would only begin to emerge many centuries later. You return to your cabin, try not to think too much about it all. But it's hard. The neighbor who was fine yesterday is now pale, and the child next door hasn't stopped coughing all day. You realize that living here is like being in a constant Russian roulette with your body. To sleep, you seek some comfort. You prepare a mixture of dried herbs that the healer taught you. You take it in silence. Maybe it works. Maybe it's poison. Who knows? In the Middle Ages, the line between healing and punishment is thinner than the straw on your mattress. And then you lie down, take a deep breath, and hope you wake up without swelling, delirium, or a doctor wielding leeches at the bedside. You wake up in the middle of the night with an itchy nose. The itch turns into a sneeze, the sneeze turns into despair, and the despair turns into an inescapable thought. You stink, and it's not a hot, sweaty day stink. It's a consistent, deep, medieval aroma. And the craziest thing? Everyone around you stinks too. No one cares. In fact, no one even notices. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where personal hygiene was more a matter of faith than practice. Bathing? Only if you're lucky, have time, access to a river, and no visible illness. Because, surprisingly, many people believe that washing too much could open the pores of the soul and let diseases in. That's right, water could be seen as a risk, as if soap had the devil in its pocket. You get up from your straw bed, slap your clothes 3 times to get rid of whatever is living there, and go looking for some kind of wash. The bucket of water from the well is there a little cloudy. You wash your face, scrub your hands, and wipe your armpits. That's it. A complete bath. That, by the way, is more hygiene than most people do in a week. If you do this twice a week, you'll be the Beyoncé of your village. In the city, there were even public bathhouses. Turkish baths, a legacy of the Roman Empire, where men and women at separate times could wash and socialize. But then came the plague, and with it, the fear of shared water. The bathhouses were closed, not because someone invented preventative dermatology, but because people thought they attracted miasmas. And miasmas, of course, were the invisible villains before the word bacteria was invented. Interestingly, nobles actually bathed more often, but private baths in wooden tubs filled with aromatic herbs, rose petals, and servants scrubbing with soft cloths. Almost like a medieval spa, except of course the sewage still ran in the open air outside. So the smell of the nobility was a little more fragrant, but far from pleasant. You come across a villager who appears to have developed a new kind of scab on his skin. He boasts that he hasn't showered since the last eclipse, and he swears he's never been sick. Maybe that's true, or maybe it's just a stinky coincidence. The fact is that body odor was so common that it became a status criterion. Wearing perfume, only the elite. The rest live with the smell of sweat, smoke, animals, and despair. And speaking of perfume, the richest people used aromatic oils, incense, and small sachets with herbs hanging around their necks or sewn into their clothes. This did not disguise the smell, but it gave it a more complex nuance. And by complex, I mean onion with lavender. Historians still debate whether there was any kind of regular cleansing ritual among peasants, or whether the practices were entirely opportunistic, bathing only when someone got married, died, or when the mud on their bodies built up a volume of its own. Records are scarce, but what is known is that hygiene, as a concept, was more spiritual than physical. You purified yourself through your soul. The body would wait. Teeth? You run your tongue over them and taste barley, wood, and existential doubt. Toothbrushes don't exist, but some people chew plant branches or use ashes to scrub their teeth. The average breath at a time could probably cure a plant. Your clothes, then, are an entity unto themselves. Made of thick wool or coarse linen, they are rarely washed. And when they are, the washing involves cold water, wood ash, and a lot of rubbing with stones. Some people scent their clothes with sage or thyme leaves, but again, this only works if the dirt level is below the tragedy line. You come across a group washing clothes in a river. A woman rubs a cloth against a rock so hard that it seems she is avenging an ancient betrayal. Children jump into the water, not for fun, but out of obligation. Washing the river is common, but only in the summer. In the winter, bathing becomes an urban legend. And what if you're sick? Then hygiene goes to a whole new level. Sick people are sometimes washed with vinegar, wine, or in more desperate cases, urine. Yes, urine, because there's nothing like a little reverse biology to cure an infection in the Middle Ages. You return to the village, now with wet feet, clothes half-stained with improvised soap and a scented smoke that, honestly, is even pleasant after what you've already felt here. On the way, he passes a knight, shining armor, flowing cape, imposing pose. But come closer, and the smell is of aged cheese with a hint of scalp, because armor was lined with thick cloth that was rarely washed, and the body beneath it, a hotbed of sweat, friction, and fungus. You understand, then, that living here means accepting the smell as part of the landscape. It's not a lack of will. It's a lack of soap, of microbiological understanding, and of any structure to keep the body clean for more than a day. You return to your straw corner, lie down, and before falling asleep, try to remember the smell of your favorite soap in the modern world. But it already begins to fade from your memory, swallowed by the medieval aroma of shared sweat. Good night, and try not to smell the pillow. You wake up and feel something moving on your neck. It's not a dream. It's a flea, maybe two. You flick the grubby linen cloth covering your shoulders, and they jump away as if they know exactly what they're doing. Welcome to your new official regalia, a set of medieval garments designed exclusively to irritate your skin, collect lice, and trap moisture in places you'd rather not mention. First observation, everything itches. The tunic you're wearing is made of coarse wool, not washed often and full of hard spots where the fabric has been patched so many times that it looks like a patchwork quilt in an existential crisis. Underneath, nothing. Literally nothing. Underwear. There's no such thing for peasants. Just a layer of fabric directly on your skin and the hope that the friction won't cause permanent injuries by the end of the day. You walk through the village, try to fix your itchy collar, and you notice that everyone around you is exactly like you. Uncomfortable, but resigned. Clothes were not made for comfort. They were made to last. And ironically, they did. A single piece of clothing could be passed down from generation to generation, as an heirloom, as a textile curse, or as a sign that no one here had discovered cotton yet. Speaking of cotton, by the way, cotton was rare and expensive. Wool and linen were the dominant materials, and both required an insane amount of effort to weave. Linen, for example, came from the flax plant, which was harvested by hand, wet, dried, spun, and woven. A process so time-consuming that it made modern knitting seem like a shortcut. You come across a lady spinning wool on a spinning wheel. She looks at you with a weary, sympathetic look and comments that your tunic fits well. You thank her. Secretly, you wonder if this means the sweat is falling in the right place. The colors of your clothes also say a lot about you. Peasant, shades of brown, gray, and dirty beige. Bright colors, only if you were noble or very lucky. Dyes were expensive, and vibrant pigments came from faraway places. Blue, for example, required specific plants. Red, depending on the season, came from ground-up insects. And yes, wearing the wrong color in the wrong village could raise suspicions. After all, why would a simple farmer be wearing a reddish robe? Witchcraft, probably, or theft, or sheer audacity, which was crime enough. Historians still debate whether clothing reflected status or simply served basic functionality. But records show that even the most humble of people cared about their appearance on special occasions. Weddings, religious festivals, public executions, which were bizarrely social events. You're called by a neighbor to help him move bales of hay. As you do so, you feel an increasing itch on your scalp. 'Cause, classic, the infestation was constant, and treatment ranged from shaving your head to rubbing it with a mixture of vinegar and ash. You choose to ignore it for now. Who's counting, anyway? Now imagine you're a woman. The clothes don't get any better. Heavy skirts, extra layers, veils covering the hair, for modesty or to avoid judgment. Maintenance was a job in itself. Women used to sew, wash, mend, and repair pretty much everything they wore and that others wore. A dress could weigh over 10 pounds, especially when wet. And without a sewing machine, of course, it was needle, thread, and prayer. Historical curiosity. There are records of underwear in the Middle Ages, but they were rare and restricted to the rich. The braca, a type of linen shorts, were worn by some men, especially under armor. But for the common people, the breeze was part of the experience. Literally, you watch a young knight pass by in his shining armor. On the outside, pure glamour. On the inside, a veritable metal oven with thick layers of padded fabric. Coldy Gambison. The guy sounds like a roast pig, walks like he's playing a board game, and breathes like an old man with asthma. It's seen as a symbol of prestige. Because if you can afford to dress like a walking piece of iron furniture, you're probably doing well in life. At the end of the day, you come home and try to peel off your sweat-stuffed tunic. The fabric squeaks and refuses to budge. The skin underneath is red, scarred, and begging for aloe vera, but you're nowhere near Latin America yet. What's the best alternative? A wet cloth and the patience of a saint. And yet, you wear the same clothes the next day, and the next, and maybe the next week. Because washing fabric is a tedious, time-consuming, and expensive task. And because, honestly, no one will notice. Everyone is in the same sweaty boat. You lie back down on your straw bed, now with a mental list of lice, chilblains, and possible allergic reactions. And before closing your eyes, think for a second about what it would be like to wear a light, clean, and fragrant cotton t-shirt. But that's a thing of another century. And for now, all you have is wool, itching, and a firm commitment to stylish medieval survival. You wake up in the middle of the night, again, not from the cold, or from fleas this time, but from a smell. A smell that defies modern explanation. It's a mix of old smoke, burnt wood, horse urine, fermented onions, and something sweet like spoiled honey. Your brain goes into a panic trying to catalog the odor. But then you remember, you're alive in the Middle Ages. And yes, you stink, but so does the world. The Middle Ages were a constant festival of smell. You step outside to get some fresh air. Bad idea. Outside, the fresh air is made up of smoke from wood-burning fireplaces, animal dung, sewage running down street gutters, and the remains of smoked fish hanging from ropes. You take a deep breath and feel your stomach lurch. And the worst part, it's a good day. You walk through the village alleys and notice that the houses have no chimneys. The smoke from the wood-burning stoves simply spreads through the rooms, impregnating clothes, hair, and walls. That's why even the smell of ordinary people is smoky. A sad but persistent smoky smell. In the streets, trash is thrown directly from the windows. Literally. Water goes. They shout before dumping buckets of waste, urine, or food scraps. You pass by and almost get a surprise shower, dodging it by centimeters with the grace of someone who has learned quickly. It is a consolidated custom. There is no trash collection. There is not even a public service, as you know it. The ground itself is the trash can, and the pigs loose in the village, they're the street cleaners. The rats, the inspectors. Everyone collaborates with the maintenance of the unhealthiness. You approach a tavern. The smell improves a little. Inside, there is roasting meat, fresh bread, and warm beer. The problem is that the heat and lack of ventilation make everything stick to your body. When you leave, you become a walking flask of smoke, fat, and barley. But you know what's crazy? This is desirable. Smelling food was a sign of abundance. You see a young woman walking by and wonder if she's wearing perfume. But when you get closer, you realize it's just a lavender sachet sewn into a dress. Women of the elite sewed herbs into the hems of their clothes precisely to disguise their surroundings. Peasant women did the same with sprigs of mint or sage, picked from their backyard. A medieval method of body splash. And since we're on the subject, repellent. A delicate subject, with mosquitoes, lice, fleas, and ticks living with humanity in forced harmony. The way was to improvise. Some rubbed garlic on their skin, others ashes, and most daring, they used animal feces. Crocodile feces, when imported from Egypt, was considered exotic and effective. Do you remember the crocodile down sunscreen? So, these people were creative and persistent. By the way, here's a rather unappetizing fact. Historians have found records of cleansing pastes made with animal fat, ash, and herbs to purify the body and ward off bad odors. One of the recipes included vinegar, dried manure, and tree resin. The academic debate is whether these were actually applied to the skin or used only in symbolic purification rituals. Either way, no one came out of this equation smelling good. In urban environments, the smell was even more aggressive. Tanneries, for example, where animal skins were prepared, used urine and excrement to soften the leather. These places were strategically placed on the outskirts of cities, not out of compassion, but because even the nobles could not stand the smell. Working there was almost a condemnation to live alone forever. In a bathroom? Oh yes, if you're lucky, you'll find a communal latrine, a hole surrounded by wooden planks, with flies that seem to have their own plans for domination. The most common, however, is the bucket at home, and after it's full, someone dumps it out on the street, preferably far from their own door. Preferably. You walk home past the stable, where horses, chickens, and goats share space with wet hay and more excrement. Children playing nearby, their sense of smell already fully adapted. And you? Well, your nose is still struggling to understand why it feels like it's in a living soup. In a late afternoon, a merchant arrives in the village with spices, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. Very expensive, of course. A handful costs more than a month's work, but the smell alone seems to redeem some of the nasal suffering. You get closer, inhale the aroma of a piece of cinnamon as if it were pure oxygen. He laughs and says that in big cities, some people burn clothes in a room to ward off evil spirits. You suspect that the spirit, in this case, is the smell of the house itself. The sun sets and you return to your corner, now filled with thicker smoke, a mixture of fireplace and dust. Your clothes have absorbed everything, your skin too, and you have a strange feeling. You're starting to get used to it. Your sense of smell begins to soften the details. Your head no longer reacts with such disgust. You are adapting. Maybe that's a good thing. Or maybe it means it's officially too medieval. You lie down, enveloped in your own wrong-century perfume, and think, deep down, the Middle Ages don't stink of evil. They just didn't have soap yet. And honestly, if you had to carry water from the well every day, you'd be reconsidering taking a bath, too. Good night, and try not to breathe too deeply. You wake up to the sound of screaming. But don't worry, it's not war yet. It's just two cats fighting on top of a thatched roof. Cats, by the way, have a sacred function here. To catch rats, keep the plague at bay. Ironically, they often fail at this mission and create gratuitous nighttime chaos. The village is alive before the sun even rises, and you drag yourself out of bed, or rather, the compacted pile of straw you dared to call a bed yesterday. Today you're going to visit a special place, the castle. Yes, the one from the stories. Tall towers, fluttering flags, knights in armor, and maidens sewing at the window. But before you get too excited, a warning. Life in the medieval castle is less fairy tale and more survival reality show with Echo. You approach the imposing structure with thick walls, a surrounding moat full of stagnant water and obese frogs, and a drawbridge that looks like it's needed WD-40 for about 200 years. Guards look at you suspiciously, but let you in. After all, you're just a curious peasant who looks like he's no threat, and the smell confirms it. As soon as you walk through the gates, reality hits you. The smell is worse than the one in the village. A mix of horse feces, rotting hanging meat, and something undefined but clearly medieval. The floor is made of uneven stone, covered in old straw used to absorb the accidents of humans and animals. Yes, horses roam inside the castle. And yes, they do what they have to do. And no one cleans it up immediately. You walk through the dark corridors. Natural light barely enters through the cracks, and the torches don't help much. The smoke from the burning wood clings to the walls, the tapestries, and you. The air is thick. Dampness rises up the stones, making everything a little slippery, a little melancholy. In a great hall, the nobility is slowly waking up. The lords and ladies sleep in four-poster beds, surrounded by thick curtains that not only provide privacy, but also keep the heat in. The problem? These curtains also keep out lice, fleas, and all sorts of other little biological nightmares. Even the wealthy cannot escape the horrors of the corporeal fauna. You watch a banquet being set up. The table is being prepared with pewter dishes, which react with the vinegar and make the food taste like old coins. The food is greasy, heavy, and over-seasoned, not out of refinement, but to disguise the fact that some of it is overcooked. Wild boar meat, game birds, pies made from everything that walks, flies, or crawls. As he watches the castellan sipping his wine, diluted with water, so as not to appear drunk before noon, a servant enters with a basin. Time for hygiene. He wets his fingertips, rubs his eyes, and that's it. He's bathed. A little perfume behind his ear, and he already feels like a feudal Apollo. You are shown around the inner chambers. The ladies' sewing room is chilly, despite the fireplace. Women sit on hard benches, sewing away, their fingers red for the cold. They chat in low voices, exchanging gossip about the blacksmith's daughter and the new squire who seems too bold for his position. But not everything is boring and cold. It is intrigue. A servant talks too much near the wrong door, and suddenly disappears. A glass of wine is spilled, and the culprit receives a public slap. The castle lives on appearances, and maintaining order is more important than justice. Historians still debate whether the feudal lords really exercised absolute control or whether, in practice, they were hostages to their own networks of favors and internal blackmail. At night, you are invited to sleep in one of the antechambers. It seems like an honor, but you soon discover that the straw mattress there is infested with life of its own. The cold seeps through the thick walls like a blade, and the noises, horses neighing downstairs, chains creaking in the wind, footsteps echoing in the dark hallways, and always, the worrying sound of someone coughing. And the worst part? The castle could be attacked at any moment. War between neighboring lords is constant. All it takes is an unresolved marriage or an old debt to turn into a siege. So, even here, surrounded by stone, coats of arms and servants, sleep is not peaceful. It is light, watchful, because you never know when the bridge will be raised or the arrows will start flying. You close your eyes, try to imagine the castle as a symbol of protection and power, but all you feel is dampness on your back and the soft crackling of something crawling under the mattress. In the Middle Ages, even living in a castle was a risk. The day dawns amidst the sound that mixes distant thunder with grunts and the snoring of someone sleeping on the other side of the stone wall. You stretch with difficulty and hear your body crackle like a piece of stale bread. In the hallway, a boy runs past. He's not playing. He's going to work, because in the Middle Ages, childhood is a concept reserved for modern history books. Here, you have two paths: help with chores or getting away until someone sends you away with a medieval beating, lead, caning, slapping, or a scolding that probably includes references to hell. You follow the boy outside and see him joining a group of children. One is carrying buckets, another is sweeping the floor, two younger children are scaring chickens with sticks. They're all dirty, wearing clothes that have clearly been worn by several siblings, cousins, and maybe even a house pig. One of them has an open wound on her knee. Her mother says it's just a cut. The problem is, the cut is swollen, dark, and smells like the back of a cheese that's been left out of the refrigerator for 6 months. Here's the harsh reality. Children work, period. From an early age. If they can walk, they can carry something. And if they can talk, they can be useful. There's no time for playing with wooden cars and cloth horses. Well, there are some, but they are rare exceptions. Most of the fun is being part of the adult routine. Grinding grain, taking care of younger siblings, helping in the kitchen, keeping the animals away from the garden. You watch a 7-year-old boy milk a goat with more precision than you could operate a coffee maker. He's serious, focused, and only giggles when the goat releases a gas that seems to come from the depths of its soul. Medieval humor. Schools, of course, exist, but not for everyone. Most peasant children never set foot in one. If they're lucky, they learn prayers and basic words from a local priest. Boys from wealthier families may have access to a tutor, someone who teaches them reading, writing, and Latin, of course, and basic math. Girls are generally trained to keep house, spin wool, sew, and hopefully not be accused of witchcraft until they are 20. You pass by a girl of about 12 washing cloths in the stream. She sings a sad song, the kind that only the Middle Ages could produce. Her mother is nearby, teaching her how to identify leaves that help with menstruation, which seems like a trivial detail until you remember that there are no sanitary pads, no medicine, no basic comforts, an old cloth and a lot of luck. And that's if she's not married yet, because at that time, menstruation was a warning. This girl can now be a wife. Yes, 12 years old. And she's no exception. It's the rule. In fact, speaking of survival, statistically, half of medieval children died before they turned 5. Infections, malnutrition, domestic accidents, respiratory diseases, plague outbreaks, the list is long. A simple cut could become infected and turn into tetanus. And if a fever did occur, the treatment was herbal tea and prayer. If that didn't work, the only thing left was to accept that it was divine will. You see a group of boys try to light a fire with rocks. One of them has burnt fingers. Another has a bandaged hand from an accident with a kitchen knife. A third is already limping after falling off a miniature horse, a rebellious sheep. All of them have the look of small adults. Children aged by work, pain, and lack of alternatives. Historians still debate whether there were real leisure moments in the lives of medieval children. Some point to simple games with rag balls, wooden dolls, laces, and even small dramatizations of biblical stories. Others believe that free time was almost non-existent for most. A childhood full of responsibility, discipline, and sometimes fear. You come across a family celebrating the naming of their newborn baby. There is a small sweet roll, a lit candle, and a prayer. The baby is red-cheeked, breathing heavily, and the parents know he may not survive the winter. But still they sing. Hope is the only thing that grows here without needing a harvest. Later, you sit with a curious child who asks you what the world is like outside the village. You smile and make up a story about rivers of milk and forests that talk. Her eyes light up. And in that moment, childhood exists. Small, brief, but real. Made of imagination in a rare moment without a burden on your shoulders. You return to your corner of the castle, thinking about all the children you saw today. Some sleep on the floor, others on straw beside the animals. Some dream, others don't even have time for that. And you wonder what your childhood would have been like here, and if you would have lived to tell the tale. You wake up to a rooster crowing outside the castle. But honestly, it sounds more like a sarcastic alarm from the universe telling you, congratulations, you're still alive in the Middle Ages. And not just alive, you're inside a castle. A building that from the outside is impressive. Inside, not so much, unless you find damp, dark, dangerous, and infested to be architecturally charming. The first shock is the temperature. Cold. A cold that seems to spring from the very stones. Castles don't have heating, of course. The heat comes from fireplaces and huddled bodies. The windows, small and without glass, let the wind pass through as if it were invited. And the tapestries on the walls, more decorative than effective. That explains why everyone here sleeps dressed up to the neck and still wakes up with their teeth chattering. You walk down the stone steps, treading carefully because slipping and falling is basically a direct route to the period hospital. Namely, the barber with the dull razor and the amputation board. The hallways are dark, lit by the occasional candle stuck in crooked holders. And the smells, you should be used to them by now, but it's like every corner has its own olfactory ecosystem. In the kitchen, chaos. Servants push each other, throw it into the oven, spill broth, and shout orders. A pig is being roasted whole, and a woman tries to scrape the coal out of the soup with a spoon as if that were possible. There are rats, lots of them, but they are treated as part of the staff. After all, who doesn't want a little surprise protein in their bread? You pass a hall where knights drink thin wine and play dice. One of them has a blue nose and is laughing too hard. You probably bet his sword or his armor. The table next to you discusses siege strategy. If the villagers resist, we burn the grain first, says a man with more scars than teeth. He laughs. You pretend to find it funny, too. Safety is a constant performance here. At the top of the tower, life is different. The feudal lord sits on a covered wooden throne, looking as if he hasn't slept in days. His eyes are heavy, his beard is unkempt, and his gaze is always suspicious. Keeping a castle running requires alliances, demands, and a daily dose of paranoia. Everyone wants to take what's yours, including your own children. You watch a noblewoman sewing in silence. She sits by the window, soaking up a sliver of natural light. With each stitch, her face reveals a little more boredom. There's not much to do in the castle if you're a noblewoman. So, pray, wait, and sometimes be offered as a bargaining chip in a political marriage that seals alliances with other families as paranoid as yours. But don't be fooled into thinking that life here is peaceful. Quite the opposite. Conspiracies are constant. A servant poisons a wine. A squire overhears what he shouldn't. A wedding turns into a massacre. Castles are pressure cookers. No Netflix, no iPhones, no privacy. And the walls listen. Literally. Servants hide in secret passages to hear everything. Homemade espionage, medieval version. You follow a guard to the top of the wall. From up there, the view is breathtaking. Forest as far as the eye can see, the river winding between hills, the village below looking like a straw model. And then the guard points out, there, see? The smoke. They're burning barns. A rival group. An attack could happen at any moment. And when it does, everyone hides, everyone arms themselves, and the castle becomes a luxury prison. Historians still debate whether castles actually provided effective security or whether they were merely symbols of power that masked a structural vulnerability. The fact is that living inside one was the equivalent of walking around with a target painted on your back. Invaders wanted your stocks, your weapons, your women, your coins. And even without war, everyday life is cruel. Diseases spread easily in closed environments. Food rots, water contaminates, servants conspire, and the master himself may decide that you have looked at him the wrong way. Justice? It depends on the mood of the day. At night, the great hall fills with voices. Bards play out-of-tune stringed instruments, sing songs about dead knights and princesses with endings that don't involve happily ever after. The nobility toast, the servants clean, and the floor is strewn with bones, chewed bread, and spilled drink. No water, no cleaning cloths. The room becomes a carpet of glorious dirt. You climb back up to your assigned room, passing a tapestry depicting a battle. All the soldiers have the same face. Probably no one remembered the real faces. You lie down on a hard mattress, surrounded by thick fabric curtains, and hear footsteps. Someone is walking down the hall in a hurry. Maybe a plot is unfolding right now. Maybe it's just someone who had too much wine. You close your eyes and think. Living in a castle is like living inside a theater that never shuts off behind the scenes. It sounds glorious, but you're surrounded by ice, secrets, and more rats than you can handle. And the most ironic thing, out there in the mud, you might sleep better. The sun isn't even fully up yet, but the aroma of something cooking already fills the castle. You follow the scent, guided by the hope of a breakfast that involves something chewy and less suspicious than what you've seen in the past few days. Spoiler alert, you're in for a disappointment, because eating in the Middle Ages isn't just a necessity. It's a logistical, spiritual, and often intestinal challenge. You enter the kitchen with the servants, where cauldrons bubble over flames and steam transforms the room into a medieval onion sauna simulator. The breakfast is simple, if it exists at all. Most of the day's calories come from lunch and dinner, or a midweek snack. What you are offered now is a bowl of oatmeal, stale bread, and a mug of weak beer. That's right, beer for breakfast. Not because the people are bohemians, but because water can kill you. You bite into your bread carefully, trying to avoid a broken tooth. Poorly sifted flour, ground on stone millstones, carries tiny chips that, over time, wear down anyone's teeth. And you notice, no one here has a white, commercial smile. Medieval mouths are chaotic collections of holes, stains, and, occasionally, crooked teeth that seem to cry out for help in Latin. The basic diet of most people is bread, porridge, boiled vegetables, and, with luck, some aged or simply forgotten cheese. Meat? Only on feast days, or if you're a noble. Or, with some irony, if an animal dies of natural causes and someone decides that it's still okay. In times of scarcity, even somewhat questionable animals are on the menu. You hear a servant saying that today the master is going to host a banquet. Reason? No one knows. Maybe an alliance. Maybe an apology disguised as roast lamb. The important thing is that there will be food. Lots of it. And probably more to impress than a feed. You are assigned to help in the kitchen. You start by washing roots. Then you cut onions. Lots of them. Your eye burns as if you had confessed a grave sin. Soon you are asked to help carry a wild boar that was hunted yesterday. The smell is not ideal, but that's okay. It will be covered in spices. And this is a constant. The fruit of the nobility is heavily seasoned not for taste, but out of need to hide the original taste, which is often already a bit stale. The time for the banquet arrives. In the main hall, long tables are covered with embroidered cloths, which will only be washed at the next eclipse. Sturdy chairs, lit candles, wine jugs, and wooden or pewter plates, depending on status, are served. The first courses arrive: meat pies, stuffed vegetables, ornamental breads, birds with feathers still on their wingtips for decoration. An exotic delicacy appears: swan. That's right, roast swan, because nothing says wealth like eating an elegant bird that is completely unfit for digestion. You, of course, don't eat any of it. Your place is in the back, watching, but even there you get an odd bone and a piece of bread soaked in grease. A gift, a privilege, a calculated risk of diarrhea. There are rules when eating. Etiquette requires that you tear the bread, never bite directly into it. Eat with 3 fingers, not 5. Never lick your fingers. Use your knife with your right hand. Your left hand? It's still considered improper, and it's not just because of superstition. Remember, there's no toilet paper? So, and speaking of which, you notice a nobleman leaving the hall, escorted to the castle latrine. A vertical hall with a panoramic view of the moat. There a plank, a sharp wind, and a twig, or straw, or used cloth. The smell rises proudly, and you understand, even with all the luxury of the meal, the end of the line is always the same. Historians point out that, contrary to popular belief, medieval food could be varied and creative, but that was the privilege of the wealthy. Most people ate the same thing every day: thin soup, hard bread, porridge. If you want to change the menu, you needed a miracle or a very generous cow. Oh, and there were religious rules. Lots of them. Lent, Advent, Fridays, days when meat was forbidden. Fish was the alternative, but those who lived far from the coast often resorted to creative solutions. Beavers. Yes, beavers. The church considered them fish, because they lived in water, So, technically they counted. You return to the kitchen, where the remains are being thrown into a ditch. Bones, rotten fruit, crushed bread guts. The smoke from the fireplace mixes everything into a unique perfume, essence of decadent abundance. The flies are grateful. At the end of the day, you get a bowl of thin broth with chunks of turnip. It's hot. It tastes like nothing, but warms your stomach. And in the Middle Ages, that was something to be thankful for. You go to bed with your stomach full enough to dream. Maybe of pizza, maybe of sushi, maybe of just a meal that doesn't involve the phrase, "I think it's still good." You should be used to the idea that the Middle Ages are uncomfortable in every way. But then comes the moment of entertainment. Finally, a break from the endless tasks, the infections, the questionable smells. You even get excited until you figure out what exactly counts as fun around here. The village is bustling. People gather in the center of the square with an energy that almost resembles a party. Laughter, murmurs, children jumping, street vendors taking advantage of the flow to offer dried apples, sweetbread, and some mysterious liquid in ceramic jars. You ask what's going on and get a casual reply. Hanging today. Ah, of course. The medieval circus has arrived. You stand in the middle of the crowd, still try to decide whether you're shocked or just cautiously curious. A makeshift stage has been set up with wooden planks. On top of it, a man is tied up, his expression somewhere between fear and resignation. They say he stole chicken, or spoke ill of the feudal lord. Remark to mark, the versions change as the gossip circulates, but the end is the same. The execution is conducted with ritual. The priest reads the song, the crowd murmurs prayers, the executioner, without a movie mask, just a sweaty guy with a tired expression, pulls the rope. And there you have it. Screams, howls, applause. Some people take their young children to watch it, as if they were taking them to a puppet show. One lady even sells amulets that say they absorb the last breath of the condemned. Yes, medieval with a hint of mystical capitalism. You step back a little, feeling sick, but you notice that no one else seems bothered. In fact, they're excited. The day's event has broken the routine. Boredom has been overcome by a brief moment of human spectacle. After that, other entertainments appear. Musicians arrive with string instruments and flutes. They begin to play ballads about past battles, heroes who killed dragons, who may have been exaggerated lizards in the stories, and maidens who waited 30 years for a love who died of leprosy. The audience gets excited. The children dance. Someone releases a pig into the middle of the circle, and it becomes the main attraction of the evening for 10 minutes. Then the acrobats arrive. A group of young people in colorful costumes begin to do pirouettes, balance objects, and spit fire with some flammable liquid that smells like despair and vinegar. The crowd cheers. You do too, until the fire almost reaches a tent made of fabric. The audience's reaction? Laugh. If it catches fire, it's just more fun. But not all entertainment is so lively. On occasion, the show turns into a public trial. People are pilloried, tied by the neck and arms in an open square, while the others mock, throw leftovers of food, or just watch with that satisfied look of someone who is grateful for not being the one punished this time. You witness one of these trials. A woman is being accused of, well, it's not clear. What is known is that she is a widow, has a black cat, and has been seen walking alone at night. 3 signs of witchcraft, apparently. The judge read, the local lord with little patience decrees a night in the stocks and a bath of shame, which means being thrown in ice-cold water with your hands tied. If you float, you're a witch. If you sink, you're innocent. A game with no winners. Historians still debate whether these events served the purpose of social control, or whether they were, in fact, an outlet for an oppressed population. What is certain is that medieval entertainment was not passive. It involved screaming, sweat, other people's sweat, and a worrying amount of involuntary bodily exposure. On quieter days, leisure took on lighter forms, telling stories around the campfire, singing popular songs, and playing dice with rules that changed with each round. Some played a rudimentary version of soccer, kicking an inflated pig's bladder between 2 points in the village, with no defined teams and basically no rules. Whoever broke the fewest bones won. You join a group of peasants playing a primitive version of who can eat the most bread without vomiting. There are no prizes, just reputation, and a little indigestion. In the absence of books, movies, or TikTok, the fun here is made up of improvisation, exaggeration, and a very close relationship with danger. Laughter comes easily, but it's also nervous. because everyone knows that at some point, it could be you on stage. At the end of the night, with the square oozing with tiredness, you sit in a corner and watch the flames of the central bonfire diminish. You can still hear the sound of the noose being pulled, the smell of gunpowder from the fire breather, and the laughter of children playing with stones and twigs. You realize that here, entertainment is not just a pastime. It is emotional survival. It is the necessary break between brutal work and imminent death. And even though it may seem strange to your modern eyes, this is what keeps these people going. You lie down and close your eyes with an unexpected thought. Maybe tomorrow you'll play dice with the villagers. Just don't bet your only boot. You wake up to a noise that is different from your usual one. It's not the animals, nor the church bells, nor the scraping of clogs on the stone floor. It's a flute, a slow melody, half melancholic, half hopeful. You follow the sound, past the kitchen still smelling of yesterday's meat, across the castle's inner courtyard, and find a group gathered together. Someone is getting married today. Medieval weddings are complex. They're not much about flowers, white dresses, and sentimental playlists. They are above all transactions. Love may appear, but it comes in through the back door, if it comes in at all. What really matters are the land, the political alliances, the dowry, and who can offer what to whom. The ceremony you're about to see is between a middle-aged gentleman and the daughter of an ally, who clearly should still be playing with rag dolls, not being dressed for a lifelong contract with someone who's already lost half her teeth. You watch as the maids prepare the bride. She is serious, perhaps nervous, perhaps numb from the weight of what this day represents. She is wearing a dress that has already been worn by others in the family, adjusted here, patched there. She is given a silver necklace as a symbol of the new honor she will bear, and there is no point in asking her if she wants it. Here no one asks. Meanwhile, the groom prepares himself, smiling, as if he traded a cow for a good deal. He shakes the bride's father's hand enthusiastically. The deal is sealed, and you realize, for men, marriage is a contract. For women, it is destiny. At the ceremony, everyone gathers in front of the church. The priest speaks in Latin. Few understand, but no one cares. The words are just part of the act. The important thing is that there are witnesses that the dowry is given, and that both are alive long enough to say "I do," or something close to it. The celebration is quick. An exchange of promises, a shared piece of bread, a kiss that seems more like protocol than passion. And that's it. Married. You hear guests commenting on the details. She looks healthy. He has a good crop. I hope they have children soon. Love? This is a bonus. Historians still debate the extent to which love marriages existed among peasants. Some records speak of couples choosing their partners, mostly out of the sight of the church and feudal lords. But in practice, even among the poor, marriage was an act of survival. Who has a field? Who can divide the barley? Who can handle winter with you? The situation for widows was even worse. If you lost your husband, you could be passed on to another family member. After all, no one wastes a fertile womb. Young widows were strategic assets, and the more children you had, the more valuable your labor was. You observe the young people of the village. Some look at each other from afar. They exchange shy smiles, avoiding direct contact. The tension is always present. A relationship outside the social rules could cost you dearly. Public punishment, forced marriage, or, in extreme cases, prison. Or worse, if the family was influential. What if the girl got pregnant without being married? It was the scandal of a century. The church intervened. The village murmured. And, in many cases, the blame fell entirely on her. Not on the boy, of course. After all, he was tempted. Classic. You hear the story of a village couple who ran away to get married far away, in secret. They were found days later and forced to confess in front of everyone. The punishment? Pay a fine, fast for a week, and clean the church on their knees. Some would say it was light. Others said it was an eternal shame. Despite all this, you meet an older couple smiling together as they pick herbs in the field. They walk side by side in comfortable silence. Maybe love will happen, even here, even with everything. But it is a love that is born later. After duty, after fear, after necessity. A love that is not flowery. It is resistant. It grows like a weed among the rocks. At the party after the wedding, there is dancing. Musicians play cheerful melodies. Wine is distributed. Bread, cheese, and even a piece of meat are served. Children run between the adults' legs. And for the first time in days, you see genuine smiles. It's strange to think that this festive moment has such hard roots. But that's life here. joy is carved out of hardship. Night falls and the bride and groom are led to the bridal chamber, which has no door. Because yes, the consummation of the marriage must be witnessed by someone trustworthy. A bizarre custom that, thankfully, is beginning to fall into disuse, but it still happens. You turn away, embarrassed just knowing about it. Privacy, here, is a modern luxury. You return to your corner with the sound of flutes fading and the smell of cheap wine in the air. Think about the weddings you saw today and the ones that didn't happen. The secret couples, the stolen kisses behind the bar, the love that resists, even when everything seems to be done to prevent it. And before you go to sleep, you are grateful that you are not part of an alliance between families with a name and laird. But you also know that here, even solitude is a risk. You wake up with a buzzing sound near your ear and a new itch on your leg. Another flea bite? Probably. But today, oddly enough, that seems like the least of your problems. The last day of your medieval journey has arrived, and you are about to face the most sacred, most intimate, and most precarious moment of life here, bedtime. You've endured questionable food, public punishments, arranged marriages, non-existent baths, and even minor key flute music. But medieval sleep is perhaps the most challenging final chapter, because in the Middle Ages, sleep isn't just about lying down and drifting off. It's about fighting for rest in a world where even your dreams can accuse you of heresy. You settle into the same corner where you've been sleeping, a pile of straw covered with thick fabric and infested with small creatures that you've decided, for your own good, not to identify anymore. The straw, when new, even smells nice. But here, it's become something between mold, sweat, and resigned peace. Around him, others lie down too, some on the floor, others on benches or leaning against the wall. There's no pillow, just a rolled-up cloth or makeshift piece of wood. Those who sleep with animals usually fare better. The warmth of their bodies helps them withstand the cold of the night. Of course, as long as you don't mind the goat snoring on the back of your neck. Darkness sets in for good. No electric lights, just torches that are quickly extinguished to save oil and the distant glow of the moon coming through the cracks. The silence is almost absolute until someone coughs or moves or lets out a soft moan of pain. Everyone is in some kind of pain, but you still don't sleep, because sleeping here is vulnerable. It's the moment when the body stops, but the fear remains. Fear of thieves, of fires, of soldiers, of ghosts. Yes, that's right. There's a widespread belief that at night, spirits come near you. And if you sleep without praying or in the wrong position, you may wake up, possessed, or not wake up at all. A serious problem. You remember hearing a lady earlier say that she never sleeps on her back because that way the devil sits on her chest. Another recommended putting a clove of garlic under the pillow. And there are even those who sprinkle salt around the bed, all to keep evil away from dreams. Interestingly, dreams are not seen as nonsense. They are messages, omens, warnings from heaven or trapped from hell. Dreaming about teeth falling out, death is near. About dirty water, illness. About a baby, someone is going to betray you. No one wakes up feeling light after a strange dream. The interpretation is taken seriously, and you may be called to explain it publicly if someone considers it relevant. You try to ignore the noises and focus on your breathing. But then comes another challenge, the cold. The nights are freezing. Dampness rises from the stones on the ground and settles into your bones. The blankets are thin, the cloths heavy and damp, and the windows, though small, letting enough wind to sway your mustache, if you have one. And yet you doze off, in parts, because here, sleep is divided. The first part lasts until midnight. After that, many people wake up to pray, keep watch, or take care of their physiological needs with the least amount of dignity possible. Read the bucket. This period between sleeps was common, called first and second sleep. Only then comes the second phase, until sunrise. Historians still debate whether this division of sleep was natural or conditioned by lifestyle and a lack of artificial lighting. But many accounts from the time mention this nocturnal pause as part of the routine. People would wake up, talk, reflect, pray. Sometimes they would even visit neighbors. You wake up in the middle of the night with sore knees. You turn out to your side, try to find a position where the straw doesn't press on any important vertebrae. You hear the sound of the wind outside, followed by a neigh and something falling somewhere in the kitchen. Nothing major, probably a cat or a burglar, but who's going to check? You decide it's not worth the risk and close your eyes again. Near dawn, the village begins to show signs of life. Someone rekindles the fire. A woman whispers a prayer. A baby cries. And you, with heavy eyes and a tired body, understand that another night has passed. You survived. You slept. Half crooked, half alert, but you slept. And even if this wasn't the sleep of your dreams, it was the sleep that was possible. A sleep that, amidst the dirt, fear, and uncertainty, is still something precious. A sleep that sustains generations, that stores energy for another difficult day, and that, above all, reminds you that even in dark times, closing your eyes for a few hours is, in itself, an act of resistance. You take a deep breath. The daylight arrives dimly, as if it were also tired, and you prepare yourself for another day where even dreaming can be dangerous. Now all is silent. The village sleeps again. The castle lies under a cold blanket of mist. The torches are unlit. The halls are empty. The field is covered in dew. You finally lie down peacefully, not on a straw mattress, but in the memories of all you have seen, felt, and survived. Every backache, every nighttime scare, every bite of stale bread, all of it melts away now, like mist disappearing with the rising sun. The Middle Ages may have been brutal, but they were also alive, full of their own rhythms, intense beliefs, and small moments of humanity amidst the chaos. The wind outside blows softly, like an ancient whisper that has passed through the centuries. You hear it, but you don't respond. You just breathe deeper. Dreams, if they come, may bring images of tapestries fluttering, of golden fields in the sun, of ancient voices singing by candlelight. But now, the journey ends, not with glory, nor with great revelations, but with that kind of good tiredness of someone who has overcome the impossible and sleeps in peace. Close your eyes. Forget the smell of hay, the sound of boots in the hallway, the weight of woolen clothes. Now it's just you, your calm breathing, and the certainty that the modern world, with all its problems, has much better mattresses. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams. Ils amours de vent pour faire onduler votre moustache, si vous en avez une. Et pourtant, on s'endort. Par moment. Car ici, le sommeil est divisé. La première partie dure jusqu'à minuit. Après cela, beaucoup se réveillent. Pour prier, veiller ou subvenir à leurs besoins physiologiques avec le moins de dignité possible, lire le sceau. Cette période entre les sommeils était courante, appelée premier et deuxième sommeil. Ce n'est qu'ensuite que vient la deuxième phase, jusqu'au lever du soleil. Les historiens débattent encore pour savoir si cette division du sommeil était naturelle ou conditionnée par le mode de vie et l'absence d'éclairage artificiel. Mais de nombreux témoignages de l'époque mentionnent cette pause nocturne comme faisant partie intégrante de la routine. Les gens se réveillaient, parlaient, réfléchissaient, priaient. Parfois, ils rendaient même visite à leurs voisins. Une sieste nocturne conviviale. Vous vous réveillez au milieu de la nuit avec des douleurs aux genoux. Vous vous tournez sur le côté, essayant de trouver une position où la paille n'appuie pas sur vos vertèbres importantes. Vous entendez le bruit du vent dehors, suivi d'un hennissement et d'une chute dans la cuisine. Rien de grave. Probablement un chat. Ou un cambrioleur. Mais qui va vérifier? Vous décidez que le risque n'en vaut pas la peine et refermez les yeux. À l'aube, le village commence à montrer des signes de vie. Quelqu'un rallume le feu. Une femme murmure une prière. Avez des pleurs. Et vous, le regard lourd et le corps fatigué, comprenez qu'une autre nuit s'est écoulée. Vous avez survécu. Vous avez dormi, à moitié penché, à moitié éveillé, mais vous avez dormi. Et même si ce n'était pas le sommeil de vos rêves, c'était le sommeil possible. Un sommeil qui, au milieu de la certitude, de la peur et de l'incertitude, reste précieux. Un sommeil qui soutient des générations. Qui emmagasine de l'énergie pour une autre journée difficile. Et qui, par-dessus tout, vous rappelle que même dans les moments difficiles, fermer les yeux quelques heures, en soi, un acte de résistance. Vous prenez une grande inspiration. La lumière du jour arrive faiblement, comme si vous étiez fatigué. Et vous vous préparez à une nouvelle journée où même rêver peut être dangereux. Maintenant, tout est silencieux. Le village dort à nouveau. Le château gît sous un voile de brume froide. Les torchers sont éteintes, les serres sont vides, le champ est couvert de rosée. Vous vous allongez enfin paisiblement, non pas sur une paillasse, mais dans le souvenir de tout ce que vous avez vu, ressenti et survécu. Chaque mal de dos. Chaque frayeur nocturne. Chaque bouchée de parasite. Tout cela fond désormais, comme la brume disparaissant au lever du soleil. Le Moyen-Âge était peut-être brutal, mais il était aussi vivant. Plein de ses propres rythmes, de ses croyances intenses et de ses petits moments d'humanité au milieu du chaos. Le vent souffle doucement dehors, tel un murmure ancien qui a traversé les siècles. On l'entend, mais on ne répond pas. On respire plus profondément. Les rêves, s'ils surgissent, peuvent évoquer des images de tapisseries flottant au vent, de chants dorés au soleil, de voix anciennes chantant à la lueur des bougies. Mais maintenant, le voyage s'achève. Non pas avec la gloire, ni avec de grandes révélations, mais avec cette douce fatigue, celle de quelqu'un qui a surmonté l'impossible. Et qui dort en paix. Fermez les yeux. Oubliez l'odeur du foin, le bruit des bottes dans le couloir, le poids des vêtements en laine. Maintenant, il n'y a que vous, votre respiration calme et la certitude que le monde moderne, malgré tous ses problèmes, a de bien meilleurs matelas. Bonne nuit. Fin du script. Faites de beaux rêves.